Palestinians legally owned that territory. And it was in 1984 when Israeli occupation forces took 3 to 5 acres and established a military outpost. And I want us to talk a little more about how Israel's strategy in taking strategic locations on top of hills, highest areas in between mountains. And when they do that, they give settlers a form of protection and confidence to be able to come out and expand their settlements. So as you were mentioning earlier, since then, it was 2018 when the uprising started happening. Settlers slowly started gaining the confidence and the strength because they felt protected by Israeli occupation to go out to this area, set out tents and stay there. But as Muhammad was mentioning, Palestinian resilience did not allow that. They made sure to out of the area. This is not your home. We own the property deeds for this area. But what's really interesting was during the uprising in the Quds, and social media was distracted with that, right? All eyes was on that because that's where all the cameras were. They took advantage of that time, and within 2 housing units, on 7 acres. So can you highlight a little more, talk to us about Israel's strategy of typically, well, as Palestinians, I live in the West Bank, I'm in Al-Mazar Sharqiyya, Allah, where I notice it's always this repetitive act of taking areas on top of a hill and then settlements after an outpost, a military outpost.
Your voice at the end of, I don't know if you were directing a question to me, but your voice, you're lagging at the last bit.
Can you hear me now?
براء إذا بدك تطفي الصوت شوي عشان أعتقد صوت نسيت آسف ديانا.
تمام يلا.
شكرا براء.
شكرا براء يعطيك العافية. Oh, Muhammad, I just wanted to make sure that you heard. Basically what I'm saying is I want us to talk a little more about what we see as Palestinians living in Palestine, Israel's strategy, their strategic strategy geographically, where they like to target areas on top of a hill to be able to oversee towns around them. And then that gives settlers, Israeli occupation settlers, the confidence and the strength to feel protected to go over and take over these areas.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The strategy on the Israeli occupation forces part is to always make their presence felt. Be this by going into random people's homes in Hebron and declaring them a military zone, or by coming here in Sheikh Jarrah and making a blockade, or creating a military outpost on top of a hill and making sure it's seen. This is a nation that is so insecure in its existence, that it's so insecure in its right to the land, that it's doing all of these terrorizing tactics to terrorize the people, to let them know that this is our land, we are sovereign here, even though they're not. I want to point out to your point, right? Often, in many cases, Palestinians have the legal deeds, like you just said. In Jabal Isbah, people have the legal deeds to the land. People legally, technically, historically own the land, and still it is being colonized. So the problem here is not about land dispute. It's not about who owns what. It's about the fact that we have a systemic effort at ethnic cleansing that it's happening in Beta, in Silwan, in Sheikh Jarrah, also all over, to take over Palestinian people's homes, to take over Palestinian people's lands and kick them out of their lands. وعلى فكرة, I'm seeing a lot of people asking me what happened in the house earlier.
Yes, I was going to ask you whenever you finish.
I would rather people be like, pay attention to what we're talking about. Sheikh Jarrah gets a lot of media attention, and today, right now, we're talking about Beta. So I expect, and then I would hope everybody's just like respectful enough to listen attentively about Beta and ask questions about Beta, because that's what we're talking about right now. We're not talking about my house.
And also, we want to point out that Israel's a colonial state, their strategy, typically it works this way, right? So maybe one area is getting more attention than the other, but the other at some point will become as extreme as this point. Because what they do is as we are all focusing and the media is giving attention to one area, they're not forgetting that they want to colonize our land. They're not forgetting about any territory. So every place that they've set in stone that they want to take over, they will take over as soon as they see, oh, Palestinians are a little distracted right now. But again, Palestinians are very resilient. So what's been going on in Jabal al-Sabih every single night is, since they built the 40 housing units in the span of 2 weeks on 7 acres of land, Palestinians have been an active demonstration, an active resistance, which, by the way, guys, I really want to point out that it is very natural for any person to demonstrate in this form and to want to defend their land and defend their homes when someone just comes and steals it from you. So I really want to focus on Palestinians are sometimes portrayed as violent, but we need to make sure that we shine light on the events that happened prior, because this is really not an act of violence. What they're doing is they're trying to disturb the settlers day and night, so they can rest assured and be reminded that this is not your land. You just came and built 40 housing units, and you're planning to expand on land that is not yours. It causes borders for us. In terms of transportation, going around, agriculture, financial benefits, Palestinians are all affected by this. So I just want to focus on really, how do we convince the international community and show the international community, because I feel like as much video footage as we have, the abundance of proof that we have that we are not violent people, we've gotten to a point where we're tired. We're tired of saying that we're not violent. This is an active demonstration of resistance.
Well, I think, in my personal opinion, I think even if the Palestinian people were violent, even if the Palestinian people were using violent resistance, we have an absolute right to be violent and to use violent resistance. We are dealing with a regime that is genocidal, that has been killing us, bombing us, stealing our homes, executing us extrajudiciously in the street, kidnapping us, arresting us, letting us rot in prison for many, 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 many decades. We have every single right to be violent. And I think we need to move away from even trying to convince the international community, because they know what's happening. It's very clear what's happening. They know how brutal the Israeli forces are, how much violence is funded by the United States directly, almost $4 billion every year. This is not about who's violent and who's not, who's a terrorist and who's not, because it's very clear who's a terrorist here. It's the Israeli regime, and it's funded by another terrorist regime, which is the United States regime. It's very violent. It's very clear who's violent here, right? So we need to be unabashed about our right to resist, unabashed about our right to live freely and safely and securely in our homes. That's what I think. Especially in the case of Beta, what's happening is admirable. We have been, depicted in mainstream media, in people who have hatta on their face, people who use hatta to conceal their identities, have been portrayed as terrorists for decades. And today we have an opportunity to reclaim that heritage of al-Mlathamin, to make sure they are portrayed as revolutionaries. And it's up to us, people like us who speak in the media, who have reach, or who just, everybody who just has social media. We need to be letting the people know that this is righteous resistance. And these images of people who are wearing this and doing that and doing this are righteous people, are beautiful people, are people that we need to respect and admire. I think that's really important, because it's clear. 5 people have been killed in Beta. 5 people. 5 people. That's what violence is. That's what terrorism is. Killing 5 people for just standing and protesting. Yes.
And hundreds injured. And not only that, I think the destruction that happens afterwards. And also, let's shine light a little on this, is there's another strategy that Israel uses, which is really scary. So when we say the Palestinians go out and they're covered up and they're portrayed and depicted in international media as terrorists or whatever, they're heroes. In reality, they're heroes. But also, I want you guys to realize something, to know something, is what Israeli occupation forces does and Israeli government does is over time they start looking over footage of people in these protests, and they go out and they arrest them. So people, they're trying to silence Palestinians even when they resist and protest in the most peaceful and silent ways. So whether they're violent or not, they're being targeted. They're losing their jobs. They're targeting them financially. So I think it's really important for us to also mention that a lot of times for Palestinians for so long, people who go out and are depicted as, like as you were saying, as terrorists and all these things, when in reality they're heroes. But it's really sad to also see that till today, it's actually dangerous. Us as Palestinians, me, if I see my friend at a protest not covered up, even though there's no tear gases or anything, me afraid for their lives, because I know that they're going to be targeted, that if Israel sees their faces, that they're going to find some shape or way or form to go out and target them and arrest them, or to make sure they lose their jobs, or just make their lives a living hell. We as Palestinians get nervous. I'm like, cover up your face, make sure nobody can actually see you. But like, we've reached a point where like, enough, like we have the right to defend our land. So I think that was really important to just mention, because I don't think a lot of people know that from the international community, and our American followers know that there's another strategy of making sure that they track down people at protests, to make sure that they pay consequences for them going out to protest against an Israeli colonial state, causing a regime in the area. So I think that was important.
بالضبط. براء، إذا بتحب تشرح لنا شوي عن وحدة حراس الجبل، عن الإرباك الليلي.
تمام. طبعا في كونوا الشبان في بيتا أكثر من وحدة، زي وحدة زي ما بسموها هسه شغالة، وحدة الكوشوك، وحدة إرباك ليلي، وحدة متابعة ورصد، وحدة فأول شيء وحدة الكوشوك اللي دائما 24 طبعا ساعة شغالين فيها. هي بجيبوا كوشوك الإطارات السيارات وبولعوهن من الجهة الغربية ليجي دخنتها على مباشرة على دخن على بؤرة المستوطنين. فمن قبل كم يوم اليوم طبعا الصبح نزلوا المستوطنين آثار الدخنة عليهم، نزلوا صور من المستوطنة وإنهم بيطالبوا إنه الجيش يمنع اللي بولعوا في الكوشوك لأنه كثير بضر على أولادهم وعلى سكنتهم فوق. طبعا اليوم مش كثير لسه شغال كثير الكوشوك، بس فعليا امبارح كان كثير مؤثر عليهم وتضايقوا كثير، وكان في مسيرة مستوطنين واجوا مباشرة هون على جبل صبيح وتأثروا كثير في الدخنة، لأنه جميع الدخنة عليهم. وحدة الإرباك الليلي هي من بداية المغرب لتقريبا الساعة 2-3 الصبح بظلوا طبعا من هاي الجهة، بكونوا من هذا سفح الجبل وتحت. منه بيستخدموا مفرقعات نارية، بولعوا كوشوك، ليزرات، إضواء، أي وسيلة إنه يقاوموا في، أي وسيلة بيستخدموها يقاوموا فيها. في كمان بس مش مبين من عندي من هون، حطوا مئذنة الجامع هون، ببثوا أظن حكيتها قبل، ببثوا يوميا لساعات الصبح قرآن في صوت عالي مقابل المستوطنة وبكون مسموع عندهم. فزي ما حكيت لك في أي وسيلة إنهم ما يخلوهم يتهنوا في الكادي هون، ما يخلوهم ينبسطوا ولا خلص يقولوا إنه راح نعيش هون في سلام. فجيرتنا سيئة زي ما بيحكوها. هسا في شغلة إنه تواجدهم هون وأطماعهم على جبل صبيح هي تقريبا تحقيق لخطة قديمة سابقة أظن لشارون كانت، إنه يفصل الضفة الغربية من البحر للنهر. هسا في هون من ورا هاي الجبل حاجز زعترة، من حاجز زعترة لكفر قاسم جميع خط مستوطنات، يعني ما في منفذ نهائيا فيه. فظل هسه هون إذا أخذوا هاي المستوطنة فهاي بداية لتحقيق اللي كانوا بدهم يعملوه زمان، إنه يفصلوا الضفة الغربية. فهاي راح تمتد من حاجز زعترة لأريحة، يصير خط مستوطنات. فراح يكون هسه محافظات الشمال ومحافظات الوسط المنفذ الوحيد لهم هو حاجز زعترة بس. في حال هسه في الوقت الحالي لو سكر حاجز زعترة في طريق ثانية من هون من أوسرين أو من عقربة ومن بيتا كمان بدخلوها وبلفوا حتى لو سكر الحاجز. بس في حال امتدت المستوطنات وحققوا اللي كان بدهم إياه فصل الضفة الغربية، فراح يكون المنفذ الوحيد زعترة، وراح تكون بتسبب خنق مش طبيعي لجميع الناس. يعني أي شيء بصير راح تصير أزمات، عائق للموظفين اللي بتنقلوا بين نابلس ورام الله بين المحافظات. فهي تحقيق على ما أعتقد إنه شارون اللي كان بده يعملها، هي فصل الضفة الغربية.
تمام براء، خليني ترجم على السريع. Bara was saying that the people of Beta have established a unit of what they call the defenders of the mountain, or the protectors of the mountain, and it's a unit of youth who are doing multiple different things to resist the presence of these settler colonizers in their land, like burning rubber and causing the smoke to disrupt the settlers' daily life, like using fireworks or creating much noise and lasers at night, like just walking and roaming and protesting at all times 24/7 to make sure that life is not pleasant for these settlers, because their presence here is making life for the Beta people unpleasant, unbearable. But I was also explaining that this settlement will be connected to more settlements in the neighborhood, in the area near Nablus, and all these settlements will make a chain from Nablus to Jericho. This will, crazily impact people's lives, their ability to move, to go to their work, to come back from their work, to go to school, all of these things.
Just to be clear, so if they expand, they would connect from the Jabal al-Sabah, which they're trying to create a settlement. They would connect to different military outposts, or directly like towards military outposts in different settlements, creating a chain. How is it going to work?
So this is, let's zoom out. Like if we're looking at Jerusalem, or if we're looking at Haifa, or if we're looking at Gaza, or if we're looking wherever, whenever there's a Palestinian presence, it's always that it's surrounded by colonies. So for example, in Sheikh Jarrah here, my voice is as loud as possible. In Sheikh Jarrah here, we are surrounded by border police, by the headquarters of the Israeli occupation police. We are surrounded by a bunch of Zionist schools, because we're in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, in Haifa, for example, it's a lot more subtle. Near Haifa, there's a Palestinian village just outside of Haifa, and it's surrounded by Israeli cities from all over. And once you're surrounded by colonies, natural community growth for you becomes illegal. Another example of this is Aisawiyah, for example, in Jerusalem, right? Aisawiyah is a small village. It's surrounded by the Hebrew University buildings. Now it's illegal for people in Aisawiyah to expand as a community naturally would. So what would happen in Beta, what would happen in Jabal al-Sabah, what would happen all over these areas is the same. We're creating chains. It doesn't matter if it's chains of military outposts or settler outposts, but the fact is you're isolating the Palestinian communities.
You're shrinking the Palestinian communities.
Yes, you're creating borders, like colonial borders around the Palestinian communities, and you are isolating them from one another. So it becomes incredibly hard for me to come to you, even if I lived only 10 minutes away from you. And that's how Israel's colonial policies have operated since the start. It's the fact that either you kill all the Palestinians and you throw them out of their lands, and if you can't kill them, you surround them and you isolate them from all areas.
And you shrink them. Yeah.
Exactly, shrink them. Exactly. بعرف إذا كنت بدك تحكي شيء. آسف قطعتك.
لا ولا.
Oh, the last point. So sorry about ثانية, because we didn't, I don't think you translated this, is that if they continue the expansion of the settlement and they actually do achieve the chain of sending it all over to Jericho, it would divide the West Bank into 2 halves, which has never happened. كمل براء، سوري متأسفة قطعتك.
لا عادي. هسه بالنسبة نرجع للوحدات. بالنسبة للوحدات عندنا هون في بيتا، فبنحاول نبتكر في أي طرق للمقاومة بعيد عن الطرق اللي بتأذينا يعني. فهاي مثلا طرق الكوشوك، فهي بتضرهم وما تقريبا ما بتضرنا يعني. احنا بس بباشروا في توليع الكوشوك، بيجي جيش بس ما بنكرب عليه ولا بنعمل مواجهات. فبنحاول نبتكر أي طرق اللي ما تخلينا نخسر شباب، ما تخلينا نشوف إصابات أو تزيد الإصابات عنا. فحاليا أغلب الطرق أو جميع الطرق حاليا ما بتعمل عنا إصابة غير بس غاز مسيل دموع يعني برموا علينا هالأيام. أما بالنسبة للرصاص الحي أو الإصابات أو الشهداء، من لما صار كثافة إعلامية على قرية بيتا تقريبا قليل كثير لا يضربوا رصاص حي. فكان سابقا لما استشهد ال4 شباب يكون في صحفي أو 2 أو 3 يعني في جميع المنطقة. طبعا جميع هاي المنطقة بكون في عليها مواجهات، والمنطقة اللي أنا فيها الجمعة الماضية كان في حشد يعني كبير من الإعلاميين، أغلب القنوات كانت موجودة. ف أول ناس طبعا انقمعوا هم الصحفية. فمع وجود الصحافة ومع وجود البث على التلفزيونات وجميع ما ضربوا ولا أي شيء حي شيء. فالكثافة
وهذا يبين لنا
الإعلامية
قديش ضروري دور الإعلام.
دور كبير إنه خففت الإصابات، خففت الحي. مش عارف.
So Barak was explaining the tactics that the Israelis. First of all, he was saying that the tactics that the Palestinians in Beta use are non-harmful, non-toxic to the Palestinians themselves, but they do harm to the Israeli colonizers. But he was also saying that since the tactics that the Israeli occupation forces use have always been tear gas, rubber-coated bullets, and even live ammunition. But ever since the media coverage on Beta has increased, they have lessened their use of live ammunition. Live ammunition, real-life bullets, is what killed the 4 or 5 Palestinian martyrs in Beta. And the fact that the presence of journalists in the community have offered some kind of protection for the community members is really important. For the 1,000 people that are watching us right now, this is why it's really important to reflect our reality, the brutality of the Israeli occupation, to social media, to mainstream media, to urge journalists to continue speaking about it, to force ourselves inside the news cycle, because this is really, like Barak explained, this is really about life and death at this point. And keeping this alive, keeping the story in the news cycle will protect more lives.
براء احكي لنا شوي عن حلول في رأيك في وقت وفي ظرف زي هاد، من كل النواحي، من ناحية like grassroots. محمد I don't know what grassroots is in
جذور
عربي.
شعبية.
تدخل السلطة، إعلام، international community، توحد المجتمعات العالمية. إيش ممكن إحنا نعمل هلأ عشان نوصل لحلول واقعية لجبل صبيح؟
هسه بالنسبة للحلول أتوقع أنه نظل مستمرين في هذا الحال، ما نخاطرش في إشي. وكان أصلا الكنيسة مطلعين قرار، أو الرئيس الجديد، رئيس الوزراء الجديد لإسرائيل، إنه بدهم يزيلوا البؤرة من أسبوع. هذا القرار طبعا ما في حدا عندنا في البلد إنه خلص ماخذ القرار في جدية، لأنه معروفين خايفين إنهم يغدروا فينا. بس للأسف إنه من لما طلع هذا القرار إحنا شايفين توسع. في
مم.
في البؤرة.
لا
يعني
براء،
هو
أنا سمعت إنه مش قرار، كان أنا سمعت إنه ما كانش قرار، كان توصية، إنه كان رئيس الشرطة الإسرائيلية بيوصي إنه تزال المستعمرة، بس ما كان في قرار. ولا عن جديد يعني صار قرار؟
أنا شفته من امبارح، وحتى
أوكي.
المؤسس المستوطن اللي هون اللي أسس هاي البؤرة، اللي دائما كان يحاول ياخذ هذا الجبل، قاعد بلم في توقيع من المستوطنين وهذا عشان يثبت هاي البؤرة ويبعثها للحكومة الإسرائيلية. ما بعرف شو بتفيد هاي بالضبط، ممكن أخبر أنت في هذا الموضوع بما أنك في القدس. فبجمعوا في توقيع اللي يبعتوها لوزارة الداخلية أو مش عارف وين حكى بالضبط، ليثبتوا وجودهم هون. فهو بيحكي أصلا إنه إحنا قاعدين على أرض مش تابعة لأي حدا، وبجيبوا في أدلة أو بجيبوا في أي شيء إنه يثبتوا إنه
هذا
هم
الحكي
مش
صار
سارقين أرض.
بعد ما فاز نفتالي بنت.
صحيح، بعد ما صار.
مم.
طبعا هو كان بنات حاكي انه بده يشيل المستوطن او بوصي، بس لما صار رئيس الوزراء فتغير الامور، صار يدعم الاستيطان، صار
أنا
يدعم
بعرف أنه كانت هاي خطوة منه أو هدف من أهدافه قبل ما
صحيح.
يفوز، أنه نتنياهو حكى خلص خليها أنه هي بؤرة، يعني أنه military outpost. بس نفتالي بنت اللي شجع أنه لا، المستوطنين يروحوا يقعدوا هناك ويبنوا بيوت.
خليني
طبعا.
أترجم بس على السريع.
تمام.
أنا تخنت شوي. أوكي. Basically, Barak was saying that there have been recommendations or demands from Israeli officials that this settler outpost must be dismantled. Yet these recommendations have only been ink on paper. We have just been seeing more and more increase in these colonies, more and more of these caravans being built, and more of this settler aggression and Israeli occupation forces aggression, more and more of that happening in Beta. Also, Barat was talking about Naftali Bennett's role in this. The settler organization, I forget their name, but the settler organization responsible for taking over the Beta or the Jabal, the Sbeh mountain in Beta, has been collecting signatures, petitioning Israeli government members, Israeli occupation government and parliament members and municipality members to legitimize its presence on here and using and citing dubious falsified claims. In my personal opinion, I think it's really important to note that Naftali Bennett, the new prime minister of the Israeli occupation state, is not just a person who brags about killing Palestinians and sees nothing wrong with it, but is someone who goes on national television and quotes the Bible as evidence of
Yes.
of land property, as what Barat was saying. This is not just about and this is not just about Naftali Bennett. It's about a government that is working to legitimize the settlers' presence in Beta, despite Palestinians legally owning the mountain.
And this is a continuous pattern that we see, I think, during every Israeli re-election that happens. Every new prime minister that comes in wants to really prove himself, right? And prove to Israelis that we're going to legitimize the state and we're going to make sure that this is a Jewish priority state. So it's very common for things like this to happen. I think every prime minister's role is worse or even the same as the prime minister before that. But I think that it wasn't something new when I saw that Naftali Bennett encouraged for this settlement to expand and actually allowed the 40, didn't stop or put any implications on settlements not being built in Jabal Sweah. I'm really not surprised. We see this all the time.
طبعا جبل صبيح هو بوقع في وسط أغلب القرى جنوب نابلس، فسيطرتهم عليه راح يخنق القرى بطريقة مش طبيعية. يعني بمجرد كبيتة، يعني مثلا هذا الجبل، هاي
لما
المنطقة
تحكي
هاي
يخنق
جميل.
القرى
راح يخنق جميع القرى، يعني راح يضيق عليهم يعني
هلا ممكن
امنيا
تشرح
في
لنا اكثر
جميع القرى.
عشان نشرح للناس بالتفاصيل. لما تحكي رح يخنق اهل القرى، شو قصدك بهاي الجملة بالضبط؟ يعني كيف رح يعني عشان الناس يقدروا يفهموا
تمام،
كيف رح
يعني
يخنقوا الناس؟
مثلا من جهة بيتا، هاي
م-
المستوطنة، هاي الأراضي مثلا شايفين جميعها، هاي راح تكون
م-
خطر على أي واحد من بيته يجي عليها، تحت خطر المستوطنين، الجيش. يعني هاي المنطقة الصناعية موجود فيها أكثر من منشأة صناعية، هاي راح تكون خطر لأي حدا يجي يشتغل فيها. يعني أراضي كثير من هون من جهة بيتا راح تكون، حتى الجبل اللي أنا متواجد فيه راح يكون خطر لأي حدا إنه يجي عليه يمارس مثلا الزيتون، حدا يجي على الزيتون على أرضه. يعني فعليا هاي جميع الأراضي راح تروح للمستوطنة، زي أي مستوطن الأراضي اللي حواليها
م-
راح تكون خطر حدا يقرب عليها. من ناحية البلاد الثانية، فهو ورا الجبل هذا في الخط الرئيسي اللي من زعترة لأريحة، وهذا الخط في عليه مداخل القرى زي يتمة، زي قبلان، أوصرين، عقربة. فإذا كان في مستوطنة هون راح يكون في حاجز على باب المستوطنة، فهذا الحاجز غير حاجز لسه زعترة، فراح يكون تضييق يعني من حاجز لحاجز. فكثير راح يتأثر المار، السيارات، الناس اللي بتروح وبتيجي يوميا.
الله يحميك.
خليني أترجم على السريع. براء was explaining that Beh mountain is many is, you know, it's in the middle of many Palestinian villages, and should there be an Israeli Zionist presence on that mountain, let alone a military outpost on the mountain, that life for these residents, like we explained earlier, would be suffocated. And you know, this extends because the Palestinian livelihood method for decades has always been agriculture. And once you're living near settlers, not only are your olive trees uprooted and burned, but you are prosecuted, sometimes killed, for even trying to grow plants in your land, for trying to take care of your olive trees, for trying to let your animals graze the land. This is particularly evident in, for example, the South Hebron Hills, where people get shot for just roaming the land and letting their animals graze the land. So it's really important to note what the significance of this settler outpost mean in the middle of this Nablus town.
براء، في عندكم إعلاميين عم بيطلعوا
هو
يوميا ولا كيف الوضع بالنسبة
الإعلاميين
للصحافة؟
تقريبا يوم بتوافدوا القنوات، الإذاعات، يوم بيجوا.
قنوات
هاي اللي
فلسطينية
بيسأل فلسطينية، الجزيرة، رؤيا، أغلب القنوات صاروا يتواجدوا يوميا هون. مثلا اللي بيسأل إيش فائدة دخان الكاوشوك، هي حاليا هي مكثفين الدخان، فجميع المستوطنة بروح.
طيب براء، إذا بتحب تحكي إشي مثلا تعويل على العالم نختم فيه اللايف، وين الناس ممكن، وين لازم الناس تعمل فولو، وين تقرأ معلومات أكثر عن جبل صبيح وتسمع من أهالي بيتا.
يعني هسه تقريبا زي ما بتحكي انه في كثير قنوات صارت تبث. بالنسبه للسوشيال ميديا، هو السوشيال ميديا حاليا هو اللي مسيطر على الموضوع. التلفزيونات حاليا مش كثير الناس بقعدوا يعني ليتفرجوا عليها. ففي صفحه عاملينها للاحداث سيف بيتا. انا برضو متواجد يوميا، ببث كل شيء بصير هون. في كمان اعلاميين متواجدين هون، بننشر اسمائهم. في هشام ابو شكرة طبعا كل يوم متواجد هون. قناة رؤيا برضو كل يوم متواجدة هون. الجزيرة علامات، الجزيرة كمان، تلفزيون فلسطين. فكلهم اغلب من يوم الجمعة الماضية لليوم الجميع متواجد هون الاعلاميين.
طيب
في إعلاميين عم
براء،
بيطلعوا بيحكوا بالإنجليزي أو بيعملوا مقابلات مع أي حدا في بيتا بأي لغة غير اللغة العربية؟
صراحة لا، ما أتوقع هسه غير على السوشيال ميديا، يعني نستضيف ناس إنه يحكوا معنا، يكونوا من برا البلد يعني بيحكوا، بس حاليا ما عملنا مع حدا من البلد، فهذا الموضوع لازم نعمله صراحة. ما عملنا لسه،
اكيد اكيد.
بس لازم نستضيف حدا من أهل البلد إنه يكون متحدث في لغة ثانية، مع إنه في كثير يعني ناس عندنا هون متحدثين في لغات متعددة.
طيب, for more information about this, please follow at Save Beta and keep in touch with Save Beta. Follow Bara also. His at is BARAA.Hussein with 2 N's. It's really important to keep up with Beta, not just Sheikh Jarrah. It's important to keep up with Silwan, with Lifta, with all over the place, with Yafa, with Haifa, with all over the place that's facing dispossession, facing settler aggression. It's really important. The smoke you are seeing in the screen right now is the smoke from the burning rubbers unit in Beta that's there to disrupt the building of the Israeli settlement. And Bara also asked you to continue speaking about Beta, and he's saying that they're going to have somebody pretty soon from the village that speaks English that will be able to talk about Beta in English constantly. But in this moment, please follow Save Beta.